If you're looking for a review on Shift by Hugh Howey, all I have to say about it is that it was one of the most engaging and amazing reading experiences I've ever experienced in my life. It made me sob 4 separate times, which is unusual for a book, not to even mention a science fiction book, and it was one of the scariest, yet enthralling and very philosophical books that I've read in a very long time. So those are my thoughts. I loved this book. I highly recommend it. Now the rest of this video will be extremely spoilery, so fair warning. Hello friends, my name is Miranda and welcome back to my universe. Today we have a different kind of video. I will be diving deep into Shift by Hugh Howey. I originally wanted to make a review of this book, but I was 40 minutes into recording when I realized I simply did not want to film a review. That was not what was happening. I could not put my thoughts in order enough in a way that I really was proud of or enjoyed or thought would be a good video. And so I quickly realized that what I wanted to film was a deep dive. So we're going to be talking about Shift, all the characters, what happens, specific scenes that I really enjoyed, just to talk about it with you. So this will be a very conversational type video, but also we will be going over the ins and outs of these silos. Now, just to recap, for those of us who would like one, what happened at the end of Wool, because Wool is the first book in the Silo series, and then we have Shift, and then we have Dust, which is the third one. I have it up on my shelf. I do not feel like taking it down right now. So in Wool, we follow around our main character, Juliet, who is our main catalyst for change. She is the one that gets sent out to clean after she had been sheriff and has been uncovering and discovering different secrets of the silo. And so she gets sent outside to clean. She survives her cleaning due to not faulty, tape on her suit, and she makes it all the way over to Silo 17. She breaks into Silo 17. She befriends our good friend Solo, aka Jimmy. They survive for, I believe it is a few years before she makes her way back to Silo 18. Wool ends with Juliet becoming a mayor of Silo 18 after their devastating, not so devastating, loss of Bernard. And she meets back up again with everyone in Mechanical, meets back up again with her father, and of course, Lucas Kyle, who was Bernard's shadow. And that's basically the gist of where Wool ends off. So we're thrown into Shift. This book is insane. Insane. Shift is made up of 3 main parts. We have the Legacy, the Order, and the Pact. The Legacy takes place in like 2049, so in the future for us, even though I will hopefully still be alive at that point. Maybe I'll make it into a silo. I guess we'll see. But the Legacy also bleeds into the early 2100s, if that's how you would even say that. I don't even know how you would say that. The Order takes place in the early 2200s, and then the Pact takes place in the early/mid 2300s. So lots of different timelines going on here. So in the first part of this book, The Legacy, we meet many characters. Our main character here is Donald. Donald is a congressman who is meeting up with Senator Thurman, another one of our main characters, to discuss basically what planning the silos look like, even though that's not what Donald realizes at the time. Donald is just trying to make it through his political career, trying to figure out where he belongs, and he has looked up to Senator Thurman for quite some time. Something to note here that we notice right off the bat is that Senator Thurman appears to never age. Remember that. So at this time, the US government is basically foreseeing unrest in their people, foreseeing a potential war, potential devastation. And so they are trying to create a project and a plan to figure out how to save their people. Senator Thurman is the lead of this project, and so he's trying to recruit people who will help him. Something to note is that Donald, when he was in college for architecture, created this plan for this silo. Now, of course, it was built to be above ground. Senator Thurman has other ideas for it, though. Donald ends up being hired for the job, and his wife Helen, who is also a pretty key character as well, she's pretty much left unaware, like the rest of the American population, of what is really going on here and what Donald is really doing when he's at work. Now, Donald and his wife live in Alabama, but for his work, he has to be in Washington, D.C. Now, in Washington, D.C. is where we meet Anna Thurman, who is Senator Thurman's daughter. And Donald and Anna used to have a relationship in college. So this relationship is definitely used to manipulate a little bit, and we see this a lot later on in the story as well. But there is a bit of rekindling in a way, right? Because Donald has spent so much time away from Anna, and now he's married and everything, and he never actually cheats on Helen, but he many times feels as though he is, because he's working so closely with Anna, and Anna she's a little sneaky. She kind of does things to seduce him. Now, what is actually happening in this project is Senator Thurman is secretively building, with a team of people, 50 silos across the United States. What the American population is told is that these are bunkers in case an emergency happens. And this is actually what Donald and the rest of his team is being told as well. So Donald is helping construct and build these silos. He's helping with all the planning, what each level can do, all that good stuff, and the whole time he's believing that these will only be used for a little bit of time, that these will just be bunkers, that people will not be living in them. At this time, the pact is written, and this is a strict set of rules for each silo to follow, but we don't really learn too much about it until the end of Wool. But in Shift, we also don't learn too much about it until later on. Now, something funny about this book is that we go between timelines all of the time. We'll read a few chapters following around Donald, and then we will hop to another few chapters where we talk about our main character, Troy. So I will leave off talking about Donald and Thurman and all that good stuff to introduce our main character, Troy. Now, he gets woken up for shifts, and he resides in Silo 1 during the, I believe it's like 2130 is the year. Now, Troy is just your average man, or so we think. He is woken up for these shifts. The whole title of this book, he's woken up for these shifts. There are other men with him. There are no women and no children. There are only men awake in Silo 1 where he resides, and he is riddled with these really terrible feelings that something bad has happened and is going to happen, and he's not in the right place, and that he's done something wrong. And so he really struggles with this, and he begins to realize that he is different in this way. Now, when someone is woken up for a shift, basically to work whatever job that they have to work for in the silo, wherever they might be, you are given medication. There are these white pills, and it's interesting. They kind of oversee you taking these pills. They make sure that everybody is taking the meds. And so Troy, because he just wants to remember, and he's starting to remember, he stops taking the pills because he believes that this is what is causing his forgetfulness. Now, Troy also meets Thurman, who, what do you know, hasn't aged a bit. And Thurman is clearly in charge of Silo 1. He runs all the shots, he calls all the shots, he knows everything that happens in the silo, he oversees it all. So Troy is put in this position where he has to call and talk to other silos and answer their calls as well. Now, shifts only last for 6 months. 6 months, and then you are put back to sleep. And I believe you're put back to sleep, I forget exactly how long, but it's quite a long time. I believe it's at least a few years, but it might even be 10 years you're left to sleep, and then you're woken back up again for your second shift, your third shift, etc., etc. Now, Troy starts to question everything as he gets closer and closer to the end of his shift. And so now I'm going to pick back up where we left off in the very beginning. So the fall of the world, basically, like how the silos began being in use, was Senator Thurman gathered everyone, Donald, Helen, Anna, his daughter, all the higher-ups, but also a lot of just the common folk and newscasters and a bunch of people, right? There's this huge event where people are they're able to tour the silos if they want to, ask the senator questions, learn more about the project. What ends up happening is Senator Thurman had orchestrated this huge nuclear disaster. These bombs are dropped. You don't know exactly what happens, but chaos erupts and people are swarming to the silos. Pretty convenient timing, don't you think? Now, there's a lot of manipulation and tactics and things going on. It is intentional where people are placed. Donald tries to find Helen, his wife, by running across a hill to get over to one of the other silos, right? But Anna stops him and drags him to the specific silo that Senator Thurman was in. So obviously, you kind of can already tell something fishy is happening. Things aren't looking good. Why do they want Donald to be separated from his wife? All these questions, right? And then once everybody is in the silos, a memory erasure happens, and Donald no longer remembers anything that happens in his past. This is when the surface becomes toxic and all the silos are used and people are brainwashed into thinking that they are the only ones alive in whatever silo that they're in. Now, what this book does good is it describes things in detail, but it also leaves a lot to be interpreted. So though it says that the silos are across America, we don't really know what that it means exactly. Only a few states are name dropped, so we actually don't really know where the other silos are. This is when Silo 1 becomes the head silo. This is where all the other silos are controlled. The people who live in Silo 1 and work in Silo 1 are the only ones that freeze their people. The rest of the silos, as far as we are aware, don't do that. Everybody can live, everybody has their memories erased, but they now live under the control of their heads, whoever they put in power at the individual silos, but then Silo 1 oversees all of the silos. So now going back to Troy's timeline, Troy begins to piece together everything slowly but surely. He realizes that he is the one who created the silos. So then the realization dawns on him that he is Donald, or at least the realization dawned on me that Troy and Donald are the same person. That was crazy for me to read. And because of this realization, Donald is upset with Thurman for using him, right? He fed him a lie saying, oh, this is what these silos are used for, when in reality, it's completely different, and it is much larger than Donald could have ever imagined. Of course, this also leads to Donald realizing that Anna also betrayed him, and Anna specifically wanted him in that silo. It's really sad. Donald actually looks up Helen and tries to find her again, but he quickly realizes that she did not make it to his silo, and so he begins looking through all the archives and the files of the other silos surrounding him until he finally finds her under the alias Karma, and she got married and had children with a complete stranger, and this kind of breaks Donald's heart, which it broke mine too, and was one of the reasons why I sobbed. And then right when Donald goes back to sleep again to end his second shift, I believe, is at that point, we then enter the Order, so the 2200s. This is when we meet a young man named Mission Jones who lives in Silo 18. This is, I believe, in the year 2210 or around that time. And he is just a young worker. He's full of life. He really likes his life, and he's trying to navigate a lot of struggles that teenagers go through. Now, Mission was a porter, basically think like mailman. He took a lot of packages and letters and various items to different levels of the silo. So he was very well acquainted with the silo and knew a lot of people on a lot of levels. One day, one of his friends is wrapped up in a tragedy, and he explodes because of the package that he was carrying. Now, this package was sent by IT, which, as we all know, if you've read, well, at least you know, that IT is just full of lovely people, and we love them so much, and they do so many good things, and they're not up to any mischief at all. Yeah, so IT sent this package to kill the porter, and to cause a ruckus. Now, because of this devastation, the silo is convinced that it is the porters that are up to all of the disasters. So they begin to go on a manhunt for Mission because he's a porter. And so Mission seeks refuge in the Crow's Nest, aka the school level. Old Crow is someone near and dear to Mission and a lot of the other school kids. They grew up learning from the Crow and they really look up to her. She read them a lot of bedtime stories regarding things and creatures that lived in the past. But of course, they all believe that they are mythological creatures and they don't exist because all they know are the creatures that are down in the silo with them. Mission also knows that his best friend is in trouble because his best friend is stuck in the IT level. And what do you know? He is a shadow for the head of the silo. Now, in the middle of us getting to know Mission, we also jump back and forth and we learn more about Donald, aka Troy, right? Who wakes up yet again for another shift. This is where Donald learns a lot of things about how the silos operate, such as once a silo rebels, they get demolished, destroyed, wiped from existence because they're rebelling and they can't have that. This is also where Donald realizes that Silo 1 is the only silo that is different, that this is the silo that works in cycles, and these cycles have been going on for centuries. This is when he begins to struggle a lot and he attempts to rebel on, I believe, multiple occasions. He at one point tries to go and wake his sister from the deep sleep. He has been put under by the doctors for many things because they realize that he is starting to rebel and that he is remembering way more than he should. He has a talk with Thurman regarding all of this and he kind of confronts him in a way and is like, why did you do this? You were never planning on setting people free. You were just going to trap them here and keep them here forever. And of course, Thurman never gives like clear answers. He's just like, everybody's gonna destroy themselves anyway. Hi, editing Miranda here. I realized I forgot to mention that an important part of this conversation with Thurman is that the reason why they're keeping Donald alive, right? Because they could easily kill him or put him in the deep freeze where he never will be woken again, which is where all the women and children are. Instead of doing this, they keep him around because they're trying to understand how he is resistant to the medication. So a big part of this conversation is Donald basically saying, I'm not resistant to the medication, I'm just not taking it. And Thurman says, no, Donald, you don't understand. Those are placebos. The medication is in the water. This was a crazy moment for me because obviously that totally throws you off and makes you realize that Donald is actually different. So that's what Thurman is trying to figure out about Donald, is how he's resistant. He also is noticing that there are other people throughout the silos, the various silos that he hears about, who are also resistant to the memory erasure, right? So he's just trying to figure it out. It's kind of like a phenomena to him. Another thing I forgot to mention is that Anna Thurman is also awake during some of his shifts. Anna is trying to work really closely with Donald. Anna is there to comfort him when he realizes that Helen has passed away and that he outlived Helen and that Helen had children of her own. Anna is there for him. And so with all of this, there comes a lot of complicated feelings of Donald feeling upset and angry, not at Helen, but at himself for being upset and hoping and wishing that Helen never was remarried. So he has a lot of conflicting emotions, but on top of this, he ends up getting together with Anna. Overall, we don't really know exactly how he feels about this, but it appears that he regrets it, and he regrets letting Anna in because she has been betraying him. Donald begins to create a plan for how to overtake Silo 1 from within. And then, of course, we bounce back and forth and we get back to Mission. Now, at this point, Mission is seeking refuge with the Crow and several of his other friends, and he is trying to figure out how to save his best friend, Rodney, who is the Shadow. Rodney actually ends up cornering all of them in the school, and he begins to confront the Crow, saying things like, you were the one that made us angry. You read us all those bedtime stories. Why did you even tell us about all these things? We should have just been living in ignorance, all these things, right? But the Crow is justifying, like, hey, you should be angry. There was a whole world outside of these walls, and now we don't get to see it anymore. Rodney has a gun, and he kills the Crow. And in the midst of all of this, he ends up shooting Mission as well. And the last chapter of this part of the book ends with Mission, and he is married happily, and he just won the lottery with his wife, and life is good. He's a farmer, he's no longer a porter, and he remembers nothing about his past. This is the part where I really went, oh shoot. They're really trying to control these people. They're not letting them remember anything. If they were a part of any sort of rebellion, anything of that sort, yeah, erase your memory or they kill you. That's the last we hear about Mission Jones. And then we have the third part, the Pact. So this takes place in like the 2310s, 2310, however you want to say it. This is where we are introduced to Jimmy Parker. And I know we have heard the name Jimmy before. If you've read Wool, this is Solo, and we are about to learn his backstory. So Jimmy lives in Silo 17, as we know. One day, his mom just pulled him from class. He didn't even have time to grab his backpack, and she took him down the silo into the deep depths to where his father had worked. This entire time that they are working their way down the silo, everybody else is making their way up, screaming. It's literally like an avalanche of people, except going up. So a stampede is a better word to describe that. Jimmy ends up being separated from his mom. He falls down several levels of the silo, and he is basically off on a mission to find his father. Now his father ends up embracing him, so glad to see him, and takes him down into a vault of a sort. They are kept secure in this room that then leads to, it's basically a bunker. There is food enough for, I believe it was 4 people for 10 years. At this point, Jimmy has no idea what's going on. Absolutely no idea what's happening. And his dad ends up leaving him to find his mother. Very quickly, we realize that Jimmy is going to end up alone because basically Silo 17 falls and everybody else slowly dies as Jimmy lives in his cell. It's basically a prison cell. On several occasions, people tried to get in. People even used his mom as a way to try to coax Jimmy to let them inside. But he realized, and he knew, according to his dad, that if he let anybody in, that they would kill him. So he never let anybody in. And both his parents died, and he has no idea who else is even alive. So we fall around Jimmy and his existence. Very sad, very gloomy and dark existence, as he has no idea what to do except survive. So he eats through a lot of the cans. He begins reading up on the world before, and he learns a lot of new things. He learns about pineapples and beaches and the ocean, things that he had no idea existed prior to that moment. And then we hop back and forth from chapter to chapter, from Jimmy, following around Jimmy in Silo 17, back to Donald in Silo 1. So at this point, Donald is discovering more and more about the twisted backstory and what is really happening with the silos. For his last shift, Donald is woken up and they call him by the name Thurman. And this is very interesting because Donald has no idea why they're calling him Thurman. And he continues on with his shift, doesn't really say anything, puts on Thurman's boots, which are too big for him, puts on his suit, everything. And he realizes that somebody hacked the system and made it so he and Senator Thurman were switched. I believe it is during this shift. I could be wrong, I might have a shift off, but I believe it's during this shift that he wakes up Anna and confronts her, basically says, "You were the one who caused all of this. You were the one who made it so I was separated from my wife. You kept me here. You wanted me here. You did it out of your own selfish desires." And Anna's trying to explain something to him, and he doesn't listen. And he shoots her, and Anna Thurman dies. This is also when Donald begins to circumvent a lot of rules, the whole time faking that he is complying and that he's doing his job and he knows everything. And that he is Thurman, right? He's playing the role pretty dang well for someone who has no idea what he's doing there. And he ends up manipulating a few of the other workers who are on shift to allow him to have way more control than he should have. And he ends up going into the deep freeze and wakes up his sister. Now, his sister Charlotte is literally the only thing left that he loves. And so he's kind of like, well, she would want me to wake her up. I'm going to wake her up. His only companion. He tells her everything that he knows, and they slowly try to work to figure out what is happening. They soon discover that there is green out in the world and that not everything is desolate. So this leads to further questions that are not answered by the end of this book. But this is when Donald, after discovering this, goes back into the deep freeze or the freezer, and he wakes up Senator Thurman. And he confronts him about everything that he has learned. He has a conversation with Thurman about what the true mission of the silos were, how Thurman killed millions of people, and questioned what the whole thing was for. And this entire time, Senator Thurman is dismissing his concerns and is justifying them by saying, I was just saving people. This was for the survival of humanity. If we let everyone out, they would kill each other anyways. So Thurman remains overall unapologetic and is convinced that the world was doomed at the start and that he was just doing something that would at least provide a way out or provide a better future for humanity. And through this conversation, Donald absolutely refuses to be just another pawn in Thurman's game, and he pulls a gun out and shoots Thurman. So at this point, he has killed both Anna Thurman and her father, Senator Thurman. Pretty crazy. After all this has gone down, he then contacts Silo 18, which this isn't the first time we've contacted Silo 18. Earlier, I believe it was the shift prior, he was in on the conversation with Lucas Kyle when he was first being initiated to head the silo, right? Which that conversation happens in Wool. It also happens in Shift as well, except we see it from the other perspective. We see it from Silo 1's side, which was really cool to see, right? That adds so much more depth to that scene. But after killing Thurman, Donald then reaches out to Silo 18 again, in which he gets in contact with Juliet. And thus it sparks the events of Wool. Now, of course, throughout all of this as well, I'm going to backtrack a little bit. We had learned more about Solo. We learned about the people that he had to kill to survive, or maybe that he didn't have to, but he ended up killing. My favorite scene in this entire novel is when he goes down to the lower levels where everything is starting to flood and he hears crying. This is simultaneously the creepiest, but also most heartwarming chapter in the entire book. He ends up looking for the source of the crying, trying to figure out what it is. It sounds like an infant. And he gets to a specific room and he shines his flashlight. Everything is pitch black, by the way. And also he's wading through several bodies. So that's a pretty cool picture to think about, huh? He discovers a kitty trying to survive, trying to get away from the water. And he ends up saving the cat and walks back to the stairwell. My favorite part about Jimmy and his struggle is that whenever he is with his companion, his cat, or when he was with people, right, he was called Jimmy. But as soon as he is completely solo and alone, he is called Solo. That is the name he has adopted. But after he gets this cat, he realizes that he is solo no more, and thus Hugh Howey refers to him once again as Jimmy. And so I just loved that. And then once the cat passed away, that was so sad. He was back to being called Solo again. And it was just amazing storytelling. I think Solo's journey and just learning more about him and all the things he did to survive up until when he met Juliet. Wow. It was fantastic. It ended his section of the book with him meeting Juliet and realizing that somebody had found him and that he, once again, wasn't solo anymore. I kind of talked about those last chunks of the book a little bit backwards because what really happens is Jimmy meets with Juliet and then it switches back over to Donald right before he kills Thurman and before he has that conversation and before he calls Juliet, right? Because those two take place in completely different timelines. It ends in about the 2300s, 2340, something like that. That is around the time that Juliet got back to Silo 18 and becomes the mayor. So we are left off with so many questions. Like, I'm sitting here thinking, what happened to Charlotte? Where is Charlotte? Is she still alive? Charlotte is Donald's sister that he woke up from the deep freeze. We also at this point don't know what happens to Jimmy, right? Because in Wool, we know that him and Juliet find the kids who are also living at the silo, and they, in a way, start rebuilding society a little bit, right? Because there's only 6 of them or something like that in Silo 17 that they know of that had survived. But once Juliet leaves Silo 17 and goes back to 18, we have no idea what happened with Jimmy and all of those kids. So I still have questions about that. I want to know how Juliet is going to handle everything with her own silo. So I'm very excited for Dust. Now let's talk about themes in this story, because there are a few of them that I want to talk about, and I think it's so great, and it wouldn't be a deep dive without some themes and what everything meant and represents. The first one that is extremely noticeable would obviously be the theme of power and control. Who is in control? Who has power? And what are they using it for? There's a lot of struggle throughout this series so far with who is in power and how they abuse this power, and how other people end up rising up to power because of what they know and how they are using that knowledge. You can see this with Juliet, who randomly became sheriff and then was sent to clean and then becomes the mayor. We also see this with Lucas Kyle and Bernard and Troy, and how he realizes he is Donald, and then he all of a sudden becomes Thurman, all because they mixed up his name. And then that leads deeper into the discussion of what gives you power. Because in this sense, right, Donald had no idea what he was doing, but because they got his name wrong and were told that he was Thurman, he was given all the power over all the silos. All because of one little mix-up. So power in that sense, right, was just handed to him. And how insane is that? With Donald's new name being Thurman, also comes the idea of identity and memory. How you can erase someone's entire memory, what they believe about themselves, what they think. You can hand them a new name and they would know nothing different. We even see this with Mission, right? I think that was a main purpose of Mission's story, was to show how easily history is rewritten, how easily your past can be rewritten if you forget all about it. Who are you? If you forget who you are, who are you? Because that's not Mission anymore. You get what I mean? Mission isn't Mission once he forgets about his past, because his past is what made him who he is. What is his identity? Before his memory was erased, he didn't want to become a farmer. And then all of a sudden, he's a farmer, married to a girl that he really was never in love with, but she loved him. And that just makes me think about so many other things. How easily can we be manipulated? Once you strip someone's memories away, their past away, their experiences away, they're just a shell of a human. There's no depth to you. If you don't remember what you've done, if you don't remember what you've gone through, what it took to get you where you are right now, you wouldn't be you without all of that. And then, of course, there's all of the ethical dilemmas with the silos and survival, and the question of whether or not humanity goes in cycles, goes in shifts. The second we stop trying to harm each other and there's peace, it's like something else happens and we're right back to square one. Was Thurman right? Was he right that humanity would just find a different way to destroy itself? These are the things I'm starting to wonder. And with all of that, that concludes my deep dive into Shift by Hugh Howey. If you are here at this point, I just want to thank you so much for sticking through all of this. If you enjoyed it, please give it a like, give me a comment, subscribe if you want more of this content. Overall shift was incredible. If I missed any big parts, got anything wrong, or if anything was confusing, please feel free to comment down below. I would love to discuss this book further because this book was such a good book to enjoy, and I want to talk about it with as many people as I can. I love you all so much. Please be safe, make good choices, and I will see you next shift.